Hello, I'm Jonathan Carr-West and I'm Chief Executive of the Local Government Information Unit, LGIU. Delighted to welcome you here to our latest video, where we're going to be looking in some depth at local authority finances, their sustainability, and what might happen in the future. And I'm delighted that we've got a really special guest to talk to us about that, Dr. Greg Stride, who works in the research team here at LGIU and is an expert in all aspects of local authority finance. He's going to be telling us a little bit about the sorts of pressures councils are under and what we can learn from how local government finance is organized in different parts of the world. But Greg, before we begin, it's probably worth just saying that in the UK, at least, local authorities are under a huge amount of financial pressure. We've been running a survey every year for the last 10 years. It makes pretty grim reading. I've spent the summer talking to over 60 chief execs and local authority leaders as part of LGIU at 40, our new campaign. And what we're hearing are stories of really quite profound financial distress. Can you tell us a little bit about what our research says about the current state of local government finance?
Yeah, definitely. Thank you very much for inviting me to be here today, Jonathan. And you're exactly right that some of the hard statistical measures that we have of council financial sustainability are suggesting that some things have gone very, very wrong. So we know, for example, that central government transfer grants have been reduced by about 40% in the last decade. So that means councils are getting less money. And we also know that they've been unable to make up for this shortfall in the amount of money that they can raise. So council's core spending power has gone down by about 20%. And on top of this, we've seen a significant number of Section 114 notices, which are effectively council bankruptcies. And we've seen these in places like Woking and Birmingham over the last few years. What we've decided to do is to go alongside these hard statistical measures is look behind the scenes by doing a survey of different local government senior figures. We've done our State of Local Government Finance survey in the beginning of 2023, and we found some shocking but maybe not surprising results. So to start off with, the level of confidence in council finances is critically low. Only about 14% of respondents said they were confident in the sustainability of council finances. And these are the people in councils who are responsible for council finances: chief executives, Section 151 officers, council leaders, both political and non-political figures whose job it is to balance the books. And they are saying that they simply can't see a way that this is going to be viable in the long term. It's been quite low over many years, but 2023 is the worst we've ever seen the levels of confidence. We had a few theories about why this might be, and some of them have borne fruit. So 90% of the people we spoke to said that additional pressures on council finances caused by inflation have been an additional problem in 2023. Unsurprisingly, there's also very high levels of people saying that the cost of living crisis is a significant additional pressure. Then we have councils saying that they're really struggling to recruit the workforce that they need for essential service provision. This is an additional pressure on top of everything else. Then we've got some things that are slightly smaller issues, like the ring fencing of local authority budgets and the dealing with any backlog in service provision caused by the COVID-19 pandemic. Now, this one here, only about a third of respondents said that the COVID-19 was still causing a problem for council finances. This is really worrying because it points to the problem being more systematic. We can't say that this is only an issue because of COVID, partly because we've been doing the survey for 10 years and it's been an issue for a long time, but also because councils themselves are saying that that isn't the main issue. Then we've been asking councils about how they're trying to balance the budget. And it's worth pointing out here that councils only have a very small number of different levers they can pull to balance the budget, and they legally have to balance their budgets. So we saw over 90% of councils saying they were increasing fees and charges, but that's a very inefficient way to gain money. You can only charge so much for parking. Then we saw about 90% also saying they were increasing council tax. And of those, nearly all of them said they were increasing council tax by the legal maximum. So this is pretty horrible for residents that council tax is going up, particularly when combined with the fact that half of councils are cutting spending on services. So citizens are paying more to get less, very unfortunately. We also see councils taking increasingly risky financial decisions, like increasing commercial investments. About half of respondents said they were doing that, and spending their reserves. 2/3 of councils said they were spending their reserves, which is the equivalent of a person spending their savings just to get by. And it's worth pointing out here that because councils legally have to balance their books, they're not very happy, our respondents, about having to take these measures. These are the measures they have to take in order to stay afloat, in order to avoid effective bankruptcy. Then we asked different councils about their opinion on how the central government is dealing with these issues. Very unfortunately, we saw that Overall, and this is across different councils with different party composition, there is a very, very low level of confidence or satisfaction with central government efforts taken to deal with this funding crisis. So only around 5% said they were confident that the central government were prioritizing delivering a sustainable funding system. That is extremely low. Then we had over here only around the 10% mark saying that they believed that central government considered local government at all in wider policy decisions. This is a critically poor relationship between two areas of the state whose job it is to deliver essential services. In an ideal world, you would see a far, far greater level of harmony.
That's pretty grim reading, Greg. In a UK context, things far from rosy. What were you able to learn by looking at how other countries organize local government finance? Are there any lessons that spring out?
Yeah, it's a really interesting question because it can become quite difficult to imagine that things can be different. But in fact, from the international research that we've done with the University of Northumbria, Dr. Kevin Muldoon-Smith, things can be very different. We've done reports on Germany, England, and Italy, and we're about to publish one on Japan as well as soon as we can. And there's a few things that are very different about the state of local government finance in an international context. Firstly, in lots of different countries, there is a far greater definition of roles, or a far clearer definition of roles. So the relationship between local and central government tends to be defined in written and entrenched constitutions. This means that the structure of local government, the relationship between bodies, the responsibilities of local government tend to be both stable and understandable. So they don't change over time, and people can look up in a single text what they actually are, which might seem like a luxury to us. Local governments across the country we've analysed have constitutional protections, which means that if they believe that their fundamental constitutional right to self-government is being encroached upon, then they can defend themselves in the courts, which is again quite different here. Then another big lesson we've seen is that in most other countries, there are significantly more revenue raising and spending options for local government. So we've just seen how there's only about 5 options that local governments can take in England if they want to stay afloat. In most other countries, they can do lots of different things. So we've seen they can only really, in England and Scotland, increase council tax, make some different limited changes to fees and charges, but other countries have a huge range of options in both how they raise money and how they spend money. So they can make local property taxes, change local business profit taxes, dog taxes, tourism taxes, and some of these don't make a lot of money, but things like being able to change the multiplier on a local property tax can be a huge revenue raiser. And crucially, it's separate from the central government. So it's local government making their own money to spend in the ways that they see fit. Then a third big lesson is the bottom-up approach to managing governance. So in lots of other countries, in places like Germany, there's a principle written into their constitution called subsidiarity, which means that services will be delivered at the lowest possible level. So you start from the ground and then essentially build your way up. You only move responsibilities to a higher level of government if there's a good reason to do so. But in England and Scotland, in general, powers or responsibilities are by default at the centre and only devolved if the central government decides there's a decent reason to do so, which means in practice that you have an extremely high level of centralisation in England, very, very high in international comparative perspective. Then the fourth big lesson is about territorial equalisation. So one of the key features of local government financing in other countries is that there are systematic efforts made to make sure that more well-off areas give money to poorer areas. By contrast, in England and Scotland, there's no requirement for any type of equalisation between areas. Rather, it's all down to the discretion of ministers in Westminster. So we're thinking there of something like the Levelling Up Fund, which means that in recent years, all territorial equalisation methods, or at least the big flashy ones, have been based on competitive bids, which means wasted resources for the losers, the people who don't win these bids. Whereas in other countries, there's systematic efforts with constitutionally or often legally protected mandate, meaning that central government or local governments have to share revenue between the places that have lots of money and the places that need lots of money. Then our final lesson is about central local communication. So we saw from the graph that there's a critically low level of trust that local government has in central government. In many other countries, there are formalized networks for central local communication and decision making. In Italy, there's a standing conference called the Local Autonomies Conference to manage central local relationship, which means that it serves to maintain contact, build trust, and work through policy challenges jointly. It's made up of representatives from Italian municipalities and central government. And it's worth pointing out that in England and Scotland, across the UK, there's no similar equivalent body. there is no obvious formalized network for central and local governments to have conversations. So this leads to things like in Scotland, we saw recently a surprise council tax freeze. This would not be possible in places like Italy, where central and local governments have to have conversations. Thank you very much for allowing me to present the research, Jonathan. Do you have any final remarks?
That's fascinating, Greg. I think what I take from that, and the question then becomes, so how do we draw on these lessons to improve policy in the UK? As part of our LGIU at 40 project, we are going to be publishing a manifesto in a couple of weeks' time that looks at the lessons policymakers here can take. And for me, there's something around that notion of what I think you and the team have called embedded autonomy. The local government needs freedom to think about, to decide how it spends and how it raises money in ways that are place appropriate. But it needs that freedom to be within a set system, a clear system of funding and powers and responsibilities. And that seems to me the clear lesson from countries like Germany and Italy, is that sort of constitutional clarity. So there's still a space for debate, there's still space for contestation, but it's within a set of parameters that all agents really understand. So there's definitely something that I think we can take forward on that. So more about that still to come. If you would like to find out more about the research Greg referred to there, it is all published on our website. Do go to www.lgiu.org, where you can find out more. But for now, thanks for watching. We hope you found that useful, and thank you, Greg, for presenting.
Thanks very much.